So welcome, everyone. Now, I acknowledge that we are a multi-faith group and hold with the deepest respect all of our different traditions. Even those of us who are Christians will come with different traditions as part of our story. And I'm going to begin with a gospel story which comes from the Christian tradition, obviously. However, I hope it will serve as an invitation to you not to necessarily adopt this particular narrative, but to learn from it, as we hope to learn from other traditions throughout this unit. And before I do that, I'm going to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, the Wurundjeri people, who we think have been around here something in the order of 60 to 80,000 years, if not longer. And for whom this land has held spirit and faith and life long before the Christian colonists arrived. And I want to acknowledge that and respect that and hold that and understand as much as I can in that. So we acknowledge the Wurundjeri people, their elders past and present, their custodianship of this land that we're on, and we give thanks for them and for their story. Okay, I'm going to read you a story. This version of it comes from the Gospel according to Matthew. There's another shorter version that's in Mark, which I also love. But I'll read the Matthew one for today. Now let's just remember that Jesus wasn't a Christian. No matter how many times I remind myself of that, it always comes as a little bit of a shock. Jesus was thoroughly Jewish. If he walked into Melbourne today, he'd wander on down to the local synagogue. He wouldn't go near a Christian church. Now that's a little bit of a confronting thing to think about, but because we think, oh, but he was so critical. He was so annoyed at his own tradition. But he was only annoyed at them because he was part of it. He was only in so much vigorous conversation critiquing the Pharisees' perspective because his own perspective was so close to that of the Pharisees. They were both actually deeply concerned to interpret the Jewish law for daily life. That was their thing. They had different ways of thinking about it, but they were very, very close to one another. And that's why they argued with each other all the time. And that kind of gives this story a particular flavour, I think, for us when we remember that. So verse 21 in chapter 15, and Jesus went away from there, withdrew to the district of Tyre and Sidon, which is foreign country. It's not Jewish heartland. And behold, a Canaanite woman from that region came out and cried, "Have mercy on me, O Lord, Son of David. My daughter is severely possessed by a demon." So Jewish Jesus has gone to a foreign part of the country where foreigners live, and a foreign woman who holds a different religion to him approaches him. But he did not answer her a word. Seems a bit arrogant to me. And his disciples came and begged him, saying, "Send her away. She's crying after us." He answered, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." but. What does but mean in our language? It's a rebuttal.
It almost implies that everything said previous to that is now obsolete.
Right. There is a saying that's a rather coarse. Everything before the but is whatever you want to delegate. It's not necessarily true. Not everything before the but is completely obsolete. But there's a sense that, okay, what has been said before is about to be argued with. Yeah.
It's a bit of a self-justification.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we can use it like that, can't we?
We can use it as
Yeah.
a self-justification.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, but she came and knelt before him, saying, Lord, help me. And he answered, it is not fair to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. Ouch! She said, yes, Lord. Yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table. Then he answered her, O woman, great is your faith. Be it done for you as you desire. And her daughter was healed instantly. I guess she was up and down my spine. Now, if you look before this little reading, if you sort of turn back a few pages, you can see that Jesus has been berating people of his own religious tradition for being hypocrites. He's been berating his own friends and disciples for having lack of faith. And then he has this encounter with a foreign woman from a foreign religion. What strikes you about it?
He's very honest.
He's very honest.
Yes.
Okay.
About himself.
Yeah. What do you mean by that? Say more.
Well, he was prepared, even though we would think, oh gosh, he's a bit not politically correct, in our culture, but he was prepared to say, well, this is how I see myself. This is who I am, and he was prepared to be genuine in that.
So he demonstrated his genuine humanity. I actually have my religious blinkers on, he said. There's only a certain amount of people here that are in my focus. Okay. So what's being challenged in here is a sense of Jesus as the divine Son of God who knows everything. What we're actually being confronted with here is a human person who has limited view. Now, I've had people argue vigorously with me about that, and that's fine, let's argue about it. Usually the argument goes, oh yes, but Jesus was just teaching everyone a lesson, and he was using this as a kind of rhetorical, lesson plan. I find that a little bit unconvincing. I would feel manipulated by the text if that was the case. I actually think the text is showing us here the real humanity of Jesus. We can argue about that, that's all right. You don't have to agree with me. So we have a Jesus here who first ignores her, then tells the disciples, well, she's not one of us, so let's ignore her. Then gets interrupted by her. Go girl. Like, this woman is a powerful woman. Now when I say that, I don't mean she has a powerful position in society. But she will not be silenced by the narrow-mindedness of the person she's seeking help from. Did I just describe Jesus as being narrow-minded? Okay.
Do we know the religion she belonged to? Sorry, what?
Well, she was a Syrophoenician woman.
Syrophoenician. So culturally,
Canaanite.
how were women seen in those days?
That's a good question.
Was she still? Was she? Was it what sort of society was sheer possession, or was
Well,
she...
the dominant community in that area was Israel at the time. And these were all little communities sort of dotted around the edge. And the way she approaches Jesus is as someone in authority, as a rabbi, teacher, Lord. So she respects his authority. She's obviously heard that he has some healing ministry. Otherwise, why would she approach him? But there would be a sense of marginalisation. In terms of Canaanite culture and the place of women, we might ask Beth this afternoon.
Yes.
Beth's our New Testament scholar who has also attached herself to pastoral theology, and she helps us with these sorts of questions. But that's a very good question.
There's kind of a reversal where it's like saying, I'm a Christian pastor, therefore I'm only allowed to preach to the Christian people. But in this it's saying, no, everyone can get value from the Christian pastor.
Yeah.
So when we go into a multi-faith context as a Christian pastor, we can still be beneficial to every single person, right?
Yeah, that's one part of it. Yeah. Yeah. So we still have something to offer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
What I find disappointing is that none of the disciples either could stand on their own
Mm.
and say, this seems wrong.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We're supposed to love everyone.
Yeah.
I
That's
wish
a really
each
interesting
one of
point.
them had
Yeah.
just,
Hey,
I
Jesus.
think if
Yeah.
he did that, one of them did that, I don't know, that in itself could be maybe what Jesus could have been hoping might happen. I don't know,
Maybe.
you said that he,
Yeah.
on one side of it could be that he was trying to teach through that.
Yeah.
Don't know.
Yeah. That's a common argument, that Jesus was
Mm.
giving the disciples an opportunity to rise to the occasion, to
Mhm.
teach them actually how you engage with people. But in fact, it doesn't appear to me to be the case. In
I
that
think
sense.
that point is accentuated by the fact that we know in other places
Yeah.
the disciples were willing to challenge Jesus, but
Yeah.
for different reasons.
Different reasons, yeah.
So
Yeah.
you get a sense that somehow those reasons were more important to
Mm.
them, and I think
Yeah.
there's something challenging, because you can't help but hear the crumbs from the table thing and think, really?
Yeah, that's right.
Did you get that?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, right.
Did anyone else hear him say
Yeah,
that? Like,
yeah.
That's
Mm.
smart, and you'd think that there would be some righteous anger that would rise up in the disciples to say, hey,
Yeah.
hang on,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah.
Settle down,
Yeah.
because they were willing to do that for other issues,
Yeah.
but not for this.
Yeah.
Why?
Their narrow-mindedness is stark.
But maybe that comes back to the female part, because the disciples had no time for the children either.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Okay. So this woman, this powerful woman, comes back at Jesus. She reasons with him. She questions his premise. She brings a critical perspective to his narrow-mindedness. Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table. She's smart because she doesn't directly challenge him. She uses his own logic to establish her argument.
But does she also see herself as a second-class citizen within that environment? Like you say, she's
Quite
been
possibly.
treated like that.
So you don't directly challenge power when the society you're living in won't support you. You use what's available to you. And if you are a smart person, you can use your smarts. Now, to me, the next bit is the bit that grabs me more than anything else. Jesus changes his mind. Jesus changes his mind. Now, that's only a powerful fact in the context of the kind of creedal affirmation that Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever, never changes, divine, knows everything, all powerful, won't change. But in this story, Jesus appears to change his mind.
But he's still following his character,
Say more.
because his character is one of love.
Okay.
Therefore, he may, you know, it seems to us that he's changing his mind, but if he totally ignored that woman and walked away from her, then he's actually going against the values that he's set in his life.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Because it appears that until she argued with him, he was about to walk away from her,
That's what we know.
according to his own values.
But that's
We only have the text.
That's right.
we can use our ideas about
Sometimes
Jesus
we're
to,
pushed.
yeah.
He pushes us though. He pushes us to.
Yeah, but see, that's what you're.
I know, I'm talking from
the
a
argument you're using
perspective-
is that Jesus knows everything, and therefore he was using this situation to teach us. Would you say?
Well, I think with Jesus, everything was a teachable moment.
Yeah. Well.
I don't think he can help himself. Could he help himself? It's not, you know.
Well, what's extraordinary for me, at least, is that he changes his mind. He sees her reasoning, and for the first time, he really sees her. It appears to me, he really sees her, and he recognises that what's happened is something that's happened in her. It's her faith, not his proclamation of healing or his divine presence or any of that. Your faith. He looks at her and says, you've just done the spiritual work required to heal your daughter. Now, whether you believe in miracles or not kind of doesn't matter. What actually is occurring here is that Jesus is recognising the spiritual dynamics, the validity of the spiritual dynamics, the living faith of someone who belongs to a foreign religion than his own. And from that perspective, it's a challenging story to those of us who perhaps for the first time are wanting to learn what it means to encounter people who belong to other religions, and to listen to them, and to hear them, to be present to them, and to value them deeply as the human people that they are.
I would agree, but I don't. My sense is, and I'm going to say this because you invite.
Yeah.
Conversation.
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
I don't think we can suggest that as long as she had faith in something, that faith has done the job. I don't think it's just a faith in whatever your faith is that you want to have faith in. And for me, as I read it, it is a commentary against this understanding of structured religion. It's, for me, the implication is your faith in me, from Jesus' point of view.
Yeah.
Not me.
Yeah.
But I think he's saying your faith, not in whatever religion your Canaanite background led you in, or even in the Jewish religion of these disciples here, or even in, but it's actually your declared faith in me that has done the work. So I don't think it's just that, I've recognised that you've got a 7 out of 10 in faith, and that is sufficient. As long as you've got the quantity, you can have faith in whatever you like. I think there is a sense in which the dialogue indicates that it's her persistence for him that is the faith that has given.
Yeah. And that's I absolutely hear that, and that's a strong argument and an attractive one. I don't know that it fully represents Jesus' position. And I only say that because there are other stories where Jesus recognises faith in another person from another tradition that has nothing to do with following him. One of those stories being his own story about when he's questioned about eternal life, reign of God, and so on. The story he provides is that of a Samaritan person who represents the kingdom of God, or eternal life. And you know, the people of his own religion in that story, in the story of the Good Samaritan, walk on by the person in need, and the Samaritan, the person from a foreign religion and a very, very suspect one. The Jews were very, very suspect of the Samaritan religion and suspect of their genetics as well. And yet he points and says, there you go. There it is over there in that Samaritan man. And my reading of that story is that he is suggesting that, as you've just said actually, it has nothing to do with the religion. It has everything to do with the particular form of life that is manifest in that person. However, I acknowledge that from the Christian perspective, yours is a valid way to read that story. I don't think it's the only way to read it, though.
I think also too, I agree with Shannon, that when you're, because I became a Christian when I was 26 and I was sharing with Nicole actually, that I'd gone down other paths, let's say. But until it was like when I met Jesus, I knew, no, this is it. Those other paths are irrelevant. This is actually where I'm meant to be and haven't looked back. But, so I'm just wondering if that woman's the same. It's like, she may have been in other faith traditions or whatever, but when she saw Jesus, she's like, no, this is it. So that's why she pursued him. And so from my own personal experience, perhaps that's...
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a valid reading from a Christian perspective. And what this invites us to consider, though, is what happens in us when we encounter someone from another religion. Because what we actually mean, and here's another perhaps controversial statement for us to consider, when we say they pursued Jesus, and so that's what it means today, that effective faith is faith that pursues Jesus for healing. What we are effectively saying today is that effective faith is Christian faith, which is a religious faith. And this, we may well hold this view, and no one's going to ask you to relinquish that view in this course. The question for us, if we hold that view, is how do we provide spiritual care for someone who is, for example, a Muslim, or Hindu, or Wicca, from a faith tradition that we perhaps don't, in our own experience or life, recognise as a valid form of faith in that sense, and yet we're being asked to provide spiritual care. And when we're being asked to recognise that spiritual care is not evangelism. Spiritual care is more akin to what I've recognised in this story of someone looking at someone from a different faith perspective and recognising the signs of spirituality, of spiritual vitality in life, in their journey, and being able to be present to that, to hold it and to allow them in your presence to do their own spiritual work, in a sense, without requiring them to jump on with you and follow Jesus. How does that sit with you? And so this is one of the key learnings in this unit. How do we actually do spiritual care in a multi-faith environment? I worked for 2 years, which seems to be about average for working with people seeking asylum in spiritual care, because it's an intensely trauma context. I worked for 2 years with about nearly 80 unaccompanied men. And in that environment there were 18 different nationalities and I think 6 different religious faiths and a lot of atheism. And I was the spiritual care practitioner. I had to work out what it meant to be a spiritual care. As a Christian, I had to work out what it meant to be a spiritual care practitioner without simply walking around saying, hey, do you want to come to church on Sunday? I've got a church service happening in the such and such, do you want to join us? How would I do spiritual care, for example, with intensely mature, faithful, observant Muslim men who had no interest in the Christian religion. How would I do that? How would I provide that spiritual care? How would I pay attention in that context? And to some extent, that requires us to recognise the validity of human spirituality and faith in other human beings, whether or not we accept their religion.
That's the same in counselling, like we sit with
Yeah.
the client's values,
Yeah.
even though we're Christian, we
Yeah.
don't use that as an opportunity to put that on them.
Mm.
We sit with their values in the Christian
Yeah.
counselling
Yeah.
context.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
I was just, I don't know, it's just that she had humility.
Mm.
And I think that that's then what Jesus mirrored back,
Mm.
his humility.
Yeah.
That he saw that she was human.
Yeah. Yeah. And eventually he saw that. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, go on.
I was going to say, I think the question that you're posing, how do we do all?
Yeah.
I hope we don't actually, my personal hope is I don't actually ever get to the stage where I think I've figured that answer out, but I'm
Yeah.
really looking forward to a semester
Yeah.
chewing
Walking
on
around
it
in them. Absolutely.
and bashing around.
Yeah.
And because I think the pursuit of the answer is really an exciting conversation. And so I want to really validate that question. And the challenge that poses if you're coming at that question as a person of no faith,
Mm.
or if you're coming as a carer of no faith, or
Mm.
if you're coming at that as a carer of a particular faith that's highly defined.
Mm.
But I guess there's a step back and you kind of touched on a squishy spot, and I want to let it go, but I can't. And you seem to be giving a lot of permission.
Yeah,
to-
absolutely. Yeah, there's no point having this conversation if we don't
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
converse.
So, the sequence of conversation you said, so faith in Jesus is a Christian faith,
Mm.
and therefore is a religious faith. And that equation isn't, I think that was an assumption there, but that equation isn't adding up
Yeah,
for me.
and that, yeah.
Because
Yeah.
for me, faith in, and I think it's a perception that is in the community that isn't, that I think the quicker we can just break that down,
Mm.
we may actually be, and I guess for me in my practice,
Mm.
dealing predominantly with non-Christian people.
Mm.
Not in a different setting, but most of my clients would not be expressing a Christian faith. But I think part of it is to say faith in Jesus is a Christian faith. I can work with that as long as it's, but I think the distinctive is, and because it's a faith in Jesus, it's a personal faith, not a religious faith. And I think that's actually, so faith in Jesus is not faith in the church. Faith in Jesus is not faith for me,
Mm.
not faith in the institution. And I think that's actually part of the aha moment is to go, so if we're pursuing faith in Jesus, then that's actually not a religious faith. And I think that's what he spent a lot of time trying to
Mm.
say.
Yeah, and I hear that, and I've journeyed long with many, including myself, who have attempted to make that distinction. And I will sit here and argue with you about that. And maybe from internal perspective, we like to make that distinction. It's a movement, it's a relationship, it's not a religion. But from an external perspective, it's a religion.
That's true, non-Christians do.
Yeah.
see
Non-Christian,
that.
if you mention Jesus, they will perceive you as
Yeah.
religious. And I think we have to argue pretty hard to make that fine distinction within ourselves, because when push comes to shove, watch how quickly the creedal statements come out. What do you actually believe? You know, what does it mean? Because if it is actually a personal, individual relationship with a human being, why are we having so much arguments about gay marriage and other things that cause the creedal statements, the religious statements, to come out on the table? But if you say you're a Christian, you should believe this, you should believe that. So we very, very quickly move from a personal, existential sense of faith into a social, structured, language, symbolic faith, which is religion. That's all I'm suggesting. So I've lived that same question, and I've come to challenge it in myself and ask myself, am I being disingenuous by making that distinction? And I'm not suggesting you are or anyone else is, but I'm asking myself that question. So let's keep having that conversation.
This is how I view it, is that if something is a personal faith, it is something that you have chosen freely. In many cultures in the world, their religion is a cultural perspective. It is something that they are born into, and it is something that they must maintain without freedom of choice. And so for me, a religion is something that is that cultural aspect and that non-freedom perspective, whereas a personal faith is something. And if someone chooses, whatever faith they choose, if they've chosen that because that's what they want to live, but if it's something that they've specifically chosen themselves, great, it's a personal faith. But if it's something that they are forced to do because of their where they have, as I say, been born, who their parents are, and they have been forced to maintain that faith through fear or basically fear, then to me that is that more religious aspect. Whereas from Christ's perspective, he absolutely says, and in this story, everything about Jesus says this is your choice. I am not going to force myself on you. You have absolute freedom over what you want to do, and then we can then personally take that and make and choose. But so many people in this world don't have that choice, and that's the sad part, and that's where I believe religion comes in.
So this is dynamic conversation. This was just the devotion. Right? So I, as I said, the question for us is not so much, I'm not going to sit here and ask you to somehow adopt an idea that all religions are basically the same. It's about, who you are as a person, not what you believe in. No one's going to challenge your personal beliefs. The question is, how do you hold your personal beliefs and provide spiritual care for another person? Now, it is a question that comes into counselling. It's more pertinent for spiritual care because we're dealing with that part of human beings that relates to their spirituality specifically. And I'm not saying that spiritual carers do that and counsellors don't, but that spiritual carers claim for this to be their particular area of expertise. And as counsellors, you will no doubt want to bring certain elements of spiritual care approach into your counselling practice. And so this becomes a really, really important question for you. How do I believe what I believe and allow someone else to believe what they believe and create a space for dignified spiritual care to take place? Can I happily wave the Muslim person along their way in an enriched sense of their own faith and spirituality and feel like I've done my job without feeling like, I didn't get them for Jesus. I failed. So the question is, do I equate spiritual health with my religion? Or can I see it as something that's available to all human beings, regardless of their religious faith? So as I said, I don't know if you watched the little lecture that was online, but this is not about interfaith dialogue, trying to work out how we all get along and how we're all the same. This is about multi-faith encounter. It's about otherness, alterity. You know that word, alterity? The dynamics of otherness in us. That's actually a good thing. In order to relate well, we need to be other to one another.
We'll respond to that by saying I'm a bit disappointed that you won't be challenging my personal faith at the same time.
You want it to be challenged. Well, I can arrange it.
Why not?
I can certainly arrange it.
If you don't, Beth will.
So, all right. We probably need to break for a cuppa soon. I didn't mean to take quite that long with the devotion, but it was good. It was a good conversation, so thank you for that. But let's, before we break for a cuppa, I thought we'd just go through the ARC site to check that you're all clear, and then we'll go and get a cuppa, and we'll come back and.
I'm just saying this room doesn't get used much because that's my handwriting on the board there.
This room doesn't get used much because the technology is weird. I just want you to notice something. When I came in, I put this on and it was all wonky, it was crooked, and I fixed it.
With the stick.
Look at my technology.
Oh,
I actually
so-
can't claim it because someone else thought of it before me, but I was really proud of myself this morning that I could find a stick. When Nicole
Did you
arrived,
find
I
the
was
same
out there
stick as
looking
the
for
other
a
one?
stick.
Did you-
No, a different
you
stick.
actually got the real
my own
stick?
stick.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this is my own
Didn't
patented
steal
stick.
someone else's. Yeah.
So as you can see, it's reasonably straight now, but that's the level of technology we operate with here at Stirling College at the moment. Okay, so has everyone, I'm assuming you've all managed to get onto ARC, otherwise you probably wouldn't be here, although I did email you, didn't I? Have you all got online? That's the
Yeah.
Wi-Fi thing there. So welcome and introduction to pastoral and spiritual care in multi-faith setting. So hopefully you've read all of that and are beginning to get clear about the basic way the unit unfolds. So we'll go through it, but just stop me if you've got questions or things to say, point out things that are not clear yet or whatever that I can clarify and fix on this. So this unit basically runs in three learning blocks that are attached to the 3 visits you're expected to do. And this is where I think this unit's more exciting than the face-to-face one. Because in the face-to-face one, you could sign up to this unit and the whole thing was organised for you, and you go along in a nice, safe little tour group. I'm not criticising it, it was a wonderful unit. And you get shown around and you get talked to and you learn a bunch of stuff, and it was a wonderful way to do it. But it was fairly safe. Fairly safe. In this expression of the unit, you have to make contact. That's the scary bit, actually. It might not be scary to you. You might be looking at me going, what's so scary about that? I know heaps of people. That's all right, good for you. I know people in last year who did this unit who were almost paralysed at the thought of having to initiate contact with someone from a different religion, let alone actually go and visit a context of faith other than their own. Now, I actually think this is one of the strengths of the course as it is now, that you are required to initiate contact with a religious community other than your own. And the question always comes back, well, can it be another denomination of, like, you know, I'm Catholic, can it be Anglican? No. Catholics and Anglicans are both Christians. I know that's hard to believe sometimes, but we all look at each other over the fence. Yeah, so no.
Churches of Christ.
We're not a religion, we're a movement.
Movement.
Okay, so yes, if you are a Christian of any denomination, you cannot initiate contact with another Christian denomination.
Does that mean we can do a synagogue?
You can do a synagogue.
Oh, yes, that's
Absolutely.
interesting too.
You can do a synagogue, you can do a temple, whether it's a Buddhist temple or a Hindu temple. You can go up into the mountains and sit with a Wicca group. You can go and talk to the Sikhs at the Sikh temple. You know, whatever. And you can even go along to the Humanist Society and talk to them, sit in one of their meetings, because atheism is not by definition unspiritual.
Mm.
You have to have faith.
I'm going to
Have
say
faith
something
in
on
it.
that. It's
Yeah.
really interesting. So, you know, I said in my group we've got all Christians, and one girl went to visit an atheist.
Yeah.
But she said at the end, he asked her, "Can you pray for me?"
Yeah, well,
she
then-
wasn't evangelising.
Yeah.
She was just having a human-to-human
Yeah. Yeah.
conversation, and then he
Yeah.
asked, "Can you please pray for me?" She was like, "What?" Okay.
Yeah.
So how would you find like an atheistic place to go visit and talk?
Google is an amazing thing.
Yeah, I know. I
Yeah,
Googled
so-
some places yesterday
yeah.
because I'm obviously not from around here.
Yeah,
So I thought,
yeah.
oh, maybe you were gonna give a few places that we could contact here. I was
Yeah.
trying to look for places and.
Yeah, yeah. So what I've done is we'll go through the whole process after we've had a coffee, but I've written a sort of pro forma letter that you can use to explain to the person you've cold called what you're doing, and particularly in Melbourne, the faith communities, particularly the Muslim, the Buddhist communities, are kind of half expecting phone calls to come in. So part of this process is getting the initial knockback. You know, what? Huh? You know, what do you... and feeling that in yourself. Oh, I'm a foreigner. I'm a stranger. People don't understand what I'm doing here. And not running away into the night screaming, I've failed, but asking yourself, okay, so how do I approach this differently now? I've rung up the local Buddhist temple. They don't understand what I'm talking about. Maybe I need to ring up the Buddhist Council of Victoria, tell them what I'm doing, show them the letter, and ask them if there's a way that they could arrange a visit at a Buddhist temple somewhere in Melbourne. You know, and they'll put you in touch with the right person, and away you'll go. And that happened to a number of students last year. There was initial resistance. One student in Brisbane contacted a synagogue, and the synagogue was particularly protective due to rising anti-Semitism in our communities. And she had to go through numerous security checks while they just observed her to see whether she was fair income, and who she was. And she felt completely othered. You know, she felt, I'm the threat. I'm perceived as the threat. Now we're wanting to learn about all that stuff. What happens in me when I encounter the other and feel myself differently to the way I perceive myself? Because I perceive myself as a really nice, loving person, wouldn't hurt a fly, I just want to come and be with you, why don't you trust me? How does that feel?
Feel how many, it's a great thing because you actually are feeling what so many people who come into this society are feeling.
Right. So this unit is a little bit about head knowledge, yeah. We want to learn what some of the actual needs, spiritual care needs of people from other religions are when they're in hospital, for example, or in prison, or at school, or whatever. Yes, there is that element to it. But the primary element of this unit is what happens in you when you encounter the radically other, and are you able to keep listening when it's happening in you? So those of us who are counsellors, we get this stuff, you know. But it's really the core skills of deep listeners to know what to do with their own stuff when it's all pinging off. You know, you talk about squishy spots and so on. You know, what's happening? Am I able to keep listening whilst all my stuff's being triggered? And
Sorry, in this too, because where I am, I'm going to try and attend places that are relevant to my community.
Yeah.
Like in Shepparton, we have like 4 mosques of
Yeah.
4 different cultures,
Yeah.
so they all have their own mosque. It's trying to work out as a woman,
yeah,
feeling like I don't want to be disrespectful and put myself somewhere, having minimal knowledge of Islam, put myself somewhere that is going to be disrespectful
Yeah.
to, I don't want them to perceive me as disrespectful. So it's actually knowing how to make the approach in a respectful way as a woman, you know, without putting my foot in it.
Yeah, and this is one of the
As-
key learnings, isn't it?
So have you written that down in your thing about how I can?
Well, in spite of some of our assumptions about Muslim communities, they are packed full of incredibly smart, strong, powerful women.
I
And they're-
know that.
yeah,
I'm surrounded
and-
by that.
yeah,
I know that.
and-
but it's still.
And so there are ways for women obviously to engage. Having said that, one of our students last year engaged with a mosque that had very few women involved in it, and sat up the back while the men worshipped and experienced all kinds of discomfort and threat, and was graded really highly in her reflective immersion report on that, because she just named what was happening for her and showed how she understood the way it was impacting her engagement with the other. So it's not so much about, am I going to get this right or wrong? My response is not going to be right or wrong in that sense. The question is, do I understand myself, how I'm responding? And will I be able to listen, pay attention to, stay present with, and create the kind of spiritual care space we're attempting to in the midst of my own response and responding.
Do we have to attend their worship, or we just meeting with them, and like what's all that
Yep.
like?
We'll go through, have you watched the first lot of videos of my visit? Half of it. We'll go through some of that. We won't do the whole thing, but we'll go through some of it and we'll talk about it as we're, so that we can talk about all those. Because some places won't have a worship service that you know. So if it's the atheists, say, can I come along to your worship service? Well, yeah, so we'll come along to the Humanist Society. We're discussing Darwinism in relation to artificial intelligence on Sunday. Why don't you come and join us and see what we do, see how we think and the way we express ourselves. So you're getting a sense of the way, and by doing that, you're putting yourself amongst people who are different to you and exposing yourself to the possibility that you may realise something of their genuine humanity and spirituality in the process.
I think I'm hoping to, not just to learn more about them, but me.
Yeah.
And I think one of the most powerful experiences that we engaged in our time in Japan is what it felt to be discriminated against as the outsider.
Yeah.
And to literally have to carry around with us at all times our alien registration card.
Yeah, yeah,
And that's what it said
right.
on
Yeah.
the top.
Yeah.
Which is one of those Japanese funny translations.
Yeah.
But to think, oh yeah, that's actually an accurate translation for
It
how
is.
you
Yeah.
feel. And I have to, at all times, be willing to identify myself as an alien
Yeah.
in your culture.
Yes.
And I'm interested in not only how, and then if someone were wanting to approach a church setting or
Yeah.
my Christian community,
Yeah.
what hurdles would they have to overcome
Yes.
that I have to
Yeah.
overcome? I had a conversation not that long ago because my office is inside a church office.
Yeah, right.
And the guy was sort of joking about coming to church.
Yeah.
Well, we can talk about that. You've initiated it.
Yeah.
And he said, oh, I couldn't because I work in an adult bookshop.
Yeah.
And I thought that's almost the same sort of assumption as how would I do this because I'm a woman?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And say, oh, that's really interesting that you would see that as a barrier
Yeah.
to come to our community.
Yeah.
What have we done wrong as a community that makes you think that would be a barrier
Yep.
to come?
Yeah, that's right. So that's just a beautiful demonstration of how many assumptions we hold about each other.
Yeah.
Untested ideas that we apply to one another on all kinds of bases, that are to do with our own development, our own prejudices and so on. And, we might think, but I'm not prejudiced. I love everyone. Well, we're all prejudiced. Without even knowing it, we're prejudiced. Prejudice is actually an important part of life. It helps us to discern and make decisions. And it's usually based on embodied emotion. Emotions help us make decisions. Where do emotions come from? Well, they're bodily responses to changes in our environment. So it's stuff that's all pre-conscious in that sense. And so it's not so much, I think we fail when we approach this by saying, "Oh, I should be this. I'm not that. I should be that." And when I don't be that kind of person or interact in that kind of way, I'm a naughty, horrible person. That's not it. It's not about judging ourselves in this process. It's about understanding ourselves. Why is it that when a Muslim man walks into the room, I can feel the change in myself? Even though up here I want to reach out and be warm and kind and introduce myself, there are other responses happening in me that make me feel shy or nervous or, whatever, or afraid. And if I don't acknowledge those things, then I'll never understand myself and I'll never be able to apply myself to paying the kind of attention to another person that they require when they're seeking spiritual care or counselling. Yeah. Did I tell the little story? I think I told the little story about the woman who rang up in Canberra when I was in Canberra and who said that there was a discussion on the radio about racism, and this woman just rang up. And you know how you talk about it, they say, "Oh, we're passing over to Judy now. Judy, what would you like to say?" And Judy just led with, "I'd just like to say that I'm racist." Everyone else has been saying, "Oh, I'm not racist. I know heaps of Aboriginal people. Some of my best friends are Muslims." All those racist kind of statements that we come out with. She just led out with it. She said, "I'm racist," and the facilitator of the conversation said, "Oh, Judy, what do you mean? Surely, you don't sound racist,
You sound nice.
Right, that's an assumption there. What does a racist sound like? And Judy said, "I've spent most of my life convinced that I'm not racist. And it's only when I came to the realisation that, in fact, whether I like it or not, I make judgments on the basis of race, therefore I am racist." And it might sound strong, but she said, I have to name that about myself before I can begin to understand myself and change my behaviour. And this kind of thinking goes all the way back to the early Greek philosophers, who basically said, the only way we learn, the only way we grow and flourish is through understanding ourselves. And I think Jesus was on about the same sort of stuff. Actually understand what the human implications of the law are. The pursuit of love is the pursuit of humanity in that sense. So, oh goodness, there's so much to talk about. There's Beth. She'll be coming in this afternoon to say hi. I hope you watched the little interview with her. She's delightful. So, there will be 3 parts to this unit, and in each part there will be 7 tasks. Same for each part. So you'll go through it the first one, you'll kind of wobble your way through and bump into obstacles and so on. You'll get to the end of it and go, and then you'll come to the second part and you go, oh, I've been here before. The only difference is it's a new experience, a new encounter, and so the reflections will be different. I'll be updating some of these things shortly. This, I think, was probably still helpful because it was just sort of a tutorial on ARC, but I think I'm going to do a new one just to make sure that's up to date. So, number 1, contact a local religious spiritual community and arrange a visit. If there are 2 of you who want to go and do this together, that's okay, but I encourage you to do it on your own for the fear factor. The unsettling factor.
He looks excited, right?
I have so many students get annoyed at me for this. You always make us feel uncomfortable, unsettled. Come on. There's no point using your religion as a kind of kindergarten. Put yourself out there. Jesus did. He was always in trouble, always in situations that no doubt made him feel all kinds of things. So I challenge you to do it on your own. If you're really, really stressed and coming apart at the seams and you want to reach out to someone to go with, that's all right. 2, read and watch the resources provided on ARC that will help you prepare for your visit. So I've gone and done visits, and each part will have a visit that you can watch. I'm about to do another one with a wonderful rabbi here in Melbourne works at Caulfield Hospital, and I'll put that up somewhere as well for you to watch once I've filmed that. So I'm building a little library of different faith visits or spirituality visits, so that you can see it happening, so that you can actually critique my way of doing it and say, well, I wouldn't do it that way. I think I'll do it this way. All right? So don't sit at my feet like some kind of guru. Just take my experience as an opportunity for you to learn how you would do it. How will I apply myself to this? So, for example, in this first part, the series of videos I've shown you, I actually involve myself quite a lot in the rituals of the group that I'm with. A group very, very different to my own religion. This is women's spirituality, known by some as Wicca, which has been associated with witchcraft. It's not what we think of as witchcraft at all. It's body, earth spirituality, and you can see that. You don't have to, if you were to visit the same group and you felt uncomfortable sitting in circle and going through some of those things, fine, don't do it. Don't do something that's going to violate you. But I encourage you to participate and involve yourself to the extent that you are able to, in that sense. But at the very least, observe and receive their hospitality. I can tell you, human beings, particularly religious human beings, are almost invariably hospitable. I can remember absolutely tearing my hair out, wondering how I was going to break through to the older Muslim men where I was working at Sanctuary. How was I going to even make contact? Because they would just keep me at a distance, smile and wave. There's the chaplain, smile and wave. Don't get involved. How was I going to do this? They wouldn't come into my office. They wouldn't let me near them. So I just kept up the smile and wave and was present and waited for the opportunity until one of the older men eventually came to me and said, "Chris, would you share lunch with me?" I was ready because I was open. Yes. So I went and he made this amazing lunch and we sat and ate lots of oily meat and rice together and chatted. It was pretty innocuous, half an hour or so of just chatting about life and the weather. And so we finished our meal and at the end he stood up and he said, "Thank you, Habibi." Habibi means brother. My family. Yeah? That was spiritual care. Not because I did anything particularly therapeutic for him, but because I received his offer of hospitality. And for him, in his religion and culture, that was the key. When someone receives your offer of hospitality, they become part of your circle of friends and family. You win trust. And from then on, spiritual care between me and those Muslim guys was about sharing food. And when you share food, you share story, you share anxiety, fear, hope, despair. And that's all spiritual work. So that, I keep preaching. Just tell me to shut up. So watch those visits and then watch that material, read the readings, prepare yourself. Get yourself in the way of thinking about this. And as part of that, begin to notice your own feelings as you approach the visit. And we'll go into that more as we look at bits and pieces of the clips. Once you've made that visit, complete the, that should be immersion report. I had to change the name because someone put it differently on the website. So complete the immersion report and provide a copy of it to the unit supervisor no later than 3 days before your supervision session. Now, Libby Sharing is the unit supervisor. Libby Sharing has a Master of Counselling from La Trobe University. She's also a senior spiritual care practitioner in a major Melbourne hospital. Delightful, warm, deep listener who will basically invite you to reflect deeply on your key learning issue that has arisen out of that visit for you. And you'll do that in groups of 3. It's online supervision, so you don't have to fly into Melbourne or any of that sort of thing. Once you have had that supervision session, you then go back to your immersion report, you make any adjustments to it that you feel you need to in light of the supervision that you've had, and then you submit it. And we'll go through the format of the immersion report. So there are 3 immersion reports. Is anyone here doing it at level 2? No? Okay. Because level 2 you're only required to submit 2 of them, but everyone else is required to submit all 3. The word count for these level units has just gone up. Yay! I think it's 8,000 words now for the whole, for all of the assessments together. Yeah. No, not 8,000 words for the essay. So each of these immersion reports is 1,500 words, and we'll go through the format of it after our coffee. So attend your supervision, and Libby's in the middle of doctoring the Google Doc, where you'll be able to get, there'll be a link will come up. You click on that, you go to a Google Doc, and you put your name in the time that you can do. There are only specific times that Libby can do, so you'll have to make yourself available in one of those times, which is, you know, just part of the way it has to be. Reflect on this process and determine the elements of this visit and reflective supervision that will contribute to your essay. And you can do that actually as part of your immersion report as well. So you'll draw from your immersion reports to begin to construct your essay. Do you know what I mean? So use that as a source.
Sorry, no, that wasn't.
Oh, you're doing a wrist exercise. Yeah. I thought you were saying, Chris, no.
Sorry.
That's right. I'll learn to distinguish between, yeah. And then attend a 1-hour online tutorial. If you can. I've made it at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, because last year we did sort of 3 o'clock in the afternoon and people were picking up kids and so on. It's kind of, because it's an online unit, if you can't make it to this, it's not the end of the world. It gets recorded and put up on ARC, okay? But if you can make it to it, do, because it's an opportunity to interact with each other, to ask the questions you've got, and to share stories, delightful, lovely stories and horror stories, if they emerge. And that's it, that's your learning block. And there are 3 of those. Don't be deceived. Time travels quickly. You need to get onto this. Don't fall foul of the idea that you've got all semester and I can squeeze them all up at the end of semester. No, because supervision happens at very specific times, and your submission dates for your immersion reports will happen at the end of each learning block.
I assume there's 3 online tutorials.
Yes.
That is, so date 1 is there, and the other
Yep.
dates.
So you probably can see here, we go down here, part 2,
Oh,
hidden
I see
from
that.
students. This is so you don't attempt to get ahead of yourself. You can get ahead of yourself in terms of if you've already got 3 visits lined up, and one of them, you know, you've had to organise a bit earlier than the second block, just do it. You know, that's because you'll be in the way of the process.
Thank you for showing us that second one briefly.
Yep.
I'm busy September 14th. I might not be able to attend that one.
Yeah, that's okay. So if you can't, you mean the online tutorial?
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you can't attend, that's fine, you just don't attend. You don't have to ring me and tell me that you can't attend or any of that sort of stuff. Just don't attend.
You'll know.
And I'll just feel, yeah, and I'll just feel neglected and lonely.
Well, I just want to tell you, it's something that you guys
Yeah,
on an
yeah,
aeroplane.
that's
so-
right. And the reason this is not visible yet is because I'm still updating it,
Oh, yeah.
and want to make sure that everything is applicable to what you need there. So this list will appear in each block, each part as it appears, and you just go through and you tick it off. And when you get to number 7 and you're ticked off, you're done. When you've submitted your immersion report, you're done with that block. Now there's a reading reflection, critical reading reflection, and an essay as well. And I haven't put the due dates up there, but they're all due. Both of those are due towards the end of semester, so after the midterm break. So focus on this first, and I'll put up a tutorial about those. We'll talk a bit about them today as well. But
So Kristen,
Yeah.
I see the 27th of August date is in there.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, that's
It's the 18th of September.
Well,
But that was
I saw-
3 o'clock in the afternoon.
I saw the
Yeah.
16th of September was at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It's more just trying to grab date placeholders. If you know them at some stage, that'd be helpful.
sorry, just. So you're talking about the online tutorial?
Yeah.
Yep. So I've updated that, 27th of August, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So the question is,
So
sorry?
if you go to the next one, which you see.
Oh, down here?
Yeah, isn't
Yeah.
available yet or something.
Yeah, that's all the old dates from last year
Okay,
still.
yeah.
So just ignore those. That's why you can't see them yet
Yeah.
on ARC. Don't panic about that. Just take one bit at a time. You can see here, book your supervision. That's currently hidden from you just because Libby's putting all her dates in and setting up the framework for you to go in. So that will be up probably by the end of this week. So you'll be able to go in and book your supervision upfront, make your
To
plans.
be clear, do we have a supervision after each visit?
Yes,
Okay, so that we can improve for the next visit.
that's right. Yeah.
And
'Cause-
recover from the one.
Recover, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Libby,
Put the pieces
falling
back together
apart.
again.
Yeah. And Libby grew up in a Christian faith. Her spirituality now is broadly inclusive and multi-faith. So she's got the skill to hold, people from broader than only the Christian religion. And she's very warm and lovely person. You'll really love her. And but she can also challenge you and invite you to grow and go deeper. That's not a but, that's an and. So down here you've got the other resources. So sorry it took me a little bit of time, but finally got the unit handbook updated. You just can click on that and it downloads. Can you see it downloading down the bottom there? Have you all done this already? Good. And this unit handbook has all the information you need about the assessment tasks and the process and so on. So it's in the handbook, but it's also all on ARC. So I've tried to make it as, there's always room for improvement, but I'm trying to make it as clear as possible because this is a process that really is self-directed in that sense, even though I'm very happy to assist you where I can. The idea is that you can really take yourself through this process and learn heaps as you go along. Beth is also a fantastic resource. Any questions about assessments or anything, if you can't get hold of me, get hold of Beth. So there's options for you to go to, because I know it can be frustrating when you're online and you've got a question and you email the lecturer and the lecturer is up to their eyeballs in something else and it takes 3 days to get back to you. And well, you've got options. You've got me, you've got Beth, and if those two fail, you can usually, and particularly if it's an online question, something's not working for you on ARC or online, ring the college and they'll put you in touch with Brian McCullen, who's the online learning person, although he's going on leave soon, but someone will be there to replace him.
I guess the other option is the forum.
Or the forum.
Or
Put
we
your
could-
question on the forum.
We could go out there and
Right.
go, has anyone
Put
else
this-
figured out
yeah.
how to...
Does anyone know where Chris is? Can someone track him down for us? Yeah, something like
Because
that.
I'd rather have you
Yeah.
tell me it's all there on page 7.
Yeah, that's right. I don't want to be embarrassed. Yeah.
And Chris comes back
Yeah.
and says it's on page 7.
Yeah, that's right. How many times do I have to say that? So just click on that. I'll just very, very quickly. This is all very slow. Anyway, there we go. There's the unit handbook for those of you who haven't seen it yet. It's got a bunch of stuff there. If there are any things in there that don't make sense to you, there's Libby. Then please let me know, because I'm always updating the handbooks, because there's usually something in there that isn't quite clear enough or could be tweaked, and your feedback's essential for that. You're the ones that actually get to shape the handbook, because it's got to work for you. So there we go. You can have a look at that in your own time. Online tutorial. So there'll always be, in each block there'll be a link to the Blackboard Collaborate tutorial. You just click on that and let's see if it works. Oh, look at that. So you just click on that link, it'll join you up. And has anyone not used Blackboard Collaborate before? Baden? Okay. It's reasonably straightforward, particularly for someone who's computer savvy like yourself. You just make sure your mic is, let's go in. Should we go in?
Yeah.
Oh, this is the abuse and trauma one. There you go, first anomaly. I'll update that link. But this is a good example of, okay, so I'm the only one in the room at the moment, but down here I've got the buttons to turn on my mic and to turn on my camera. Share video, yes please. Now, because Wi-Fi is the limited beast that it is, if we've got 16 people on Blackboard Collaborate and we're all sharing our video and audio, it's going to break down. It's just limited in that sense. So the way we normally use it is to keep our video and microphone off until such time as we want to contribute. And then we either put our hand up or whatever, or I say, Baden, have you got something to say on this? And Baden clicks on his bits and pieces, becomes visible, becomes audible and can contribute. And then when he's finished, he retreats. And that just enables an easier flow of the way we do that. Is that all fairly clear? And there'll be different things up here. I might take you through one of the readings. We might do an exercise together. I might actually just take questions and treat it as a real tutorial in that sense that it might be just a session for me to say, how you going? Are there any questions? Is anyone dying out there? Like, what's going on? And we can just share in that sense and build community in that way. Normally we would have more Blackboard Collaborate tutorial sessions in a unit, usually once every second week.
I want to see if it worked on my phone.
Good. Baden's joining. But because you're being required to engage in supervision as well, it's a lot, that makes quite a lot, particularly when you're frantically trying to write. There we go, I'm over there. So when you want to leave the session, you just, you just click leave session down here. And then it asks you for feedback, and you don't give it. And it makes big loud noises at you.
That's because you didn't give feedback.
That's right. All right. Oops, where did we go? I just totally dropped out of the whole situation. Now, are there any questions before we go and have a cuppa? Oh goodness, we better go and have a cuppa. Before we have a cuppa, are there any questions about this?
Will you come back to the book review and the essay?
Yep.
And you're going to go through Dave?
Yeah, we'll go through all of the assessment tasks in detail this afternoon because they're usually they're the anxiety points. It's like, I want to pass. Yes, I want to learn something, but I want to pass. I just want to finish this thing. So yes, we'll come back to that. What we'll do when we come back from coffee is we'll just have a look at some of those videos and I'll just explain my theories around what I'm doing in each of those so you can get a sense of how I'm approaching that. And then we'll talk a bit more about the supervision process. Then we'll have lunch, and then we'll come back and talk about spirituality, spiritual care, what they are. I know some of us have done the introductory course to spiritual care here, but not all of us. And so but we're always learning. And because my particular approach to spirituality might be novel, you might want to hear something about that from me. I don't know. You might not. Might help. And then we'll also do the assessments. We're going to try and finish around about 3:30. Does that kind of accord with your expectations? Right, let's go and get a cuppa, go to the loo, whatever we need to do.